Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome back, or welcome to the first time to your Forest podcast with me, Matthew Christoph. And today, I've got Jim Donaldson. Jim Donaldson works out of Stony Plain, which is just west of Edmonton here, and he is trying to create a wood waste recycling community to try and promote innovation in that sense. So there's a lot of wood waste right now that goes, construction material or residues from mills or what else? Even harvest residues. So after a cut block happens or a lease site, there's a bunch of residues that can't be utilized, so it's left and burnt on site. So he's trying to figure out a way to take that biomass, instead of burning it off and wasting it and just going into the atmosphere. He's trying to collect that as a resource and find a way to actually promote that as an industry and create an energy or a soil additive or something. Just basically trying not to, because right now a lot of that wood waste goes into a landfill. So all your construction material just goes into a landfill. They may burn it, they may bury it. But he's trying to find a way to actually utilize it as a resource, because it's a resource that can be used. You can create ethanol. You can create pellets, wood pellets for burning. You can create, there's barnwood. You can rejuvenate it, remove it from the lignin and the cellulose from its component parts, and you can create new materials from that. So there's all kinds of stuff that's can be done, and it currently isn't really being done at a commercial scale. So he's trying to create a group of people or a group of organizations that can connect one another and try and get these industries started. So that's Jim. Great dude. He's really passionate about this kind of stuff, really believes in it, and understands that, wood is one of the truly sustainable building materials that we have, and he wants to make sure that we're using it to its full potential. So yeah, like I said, Jim's a great dude. I think you guys will like it. It was a great conversation. And as far as sponsors are concerned, same three: Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta, Greenland Forestry, and Damaged Timber. Damaged Timber is an apparel company. You can go to their website, damagedtimber.com. You can get hats, toques. They're getting hoodies, got new designs coming out. And they take 10% of everything they get, and they put it towards a scholarship for environmental sciences students. So if you want to support environmental sciences through the buying of clothes, go to damagedtimber.com. Put in your Forest 10 at checkout, get 10% off. Good to go. I've got lots of potential podcasts coming up in the future here. So I'm getting excited. It's awesome. So, all right, here we go. Jim.
Good morning, Matthew.
I wanted to start out. I'm trying to figure out how to paint this picture regarding wood waste recycling, right? So I guess let's just start off with yourself. How did you get into this type of work, and where does this passion come from?
A little bit of a background. The family was in the logging business industry from the late 50s, early 60s in Chilliwack, Kitimat, and then we were in the logging woodlands, drove cat for a number of years for Riverside Forest Products.
Okay.
Out of Vernon Armstrong. Moved down to the coast, Vancouver in 86, and then 5 years later, an opportunity came to get involved in the waste disposal industry, and thusly I became a sales rep with a couple front end and roll off waste disposal companies. A couple years go by, 94, 95. Friend Sean Maberly invited me to get involved with him, and he wanted to build a wood recycling facility and have the reuse markets and all that. So we sat down many meetings. We came to a conclusion, and I became the sales, marketing, business development coordinator, sourcing wood waste materials, construction, demolition, wood waste from forestry, logging, whatever, in the lower mainland of British Columbia.
Right. So that was the next thing I was going to say. What is when you say wood waste, do you mean all wood waste?
So we started off with the company called Urban Wood Waste, and through literature and education, our acceptable materials list were construction, demolition, furniture, pallets, dunnage, cable spools, tree trimmings, stumps, branches. Non-treated was railway and utility. We weren't worried about MDF and particle board. That was all acceptable. And so we would sort and separate, charge a scaling fee of back then, $40 a ton to bring in our acceptable wood waste. Landfill at the time was $65. And from there, we'd set up a facility so that we could scale in and scale out, as in the trucks coming and going, and we'd sort through a conveyor system and a manual sorting system, 6 sorts and products. The end product was hammer milled wood waste, shrink, film wrap, and bubble wrap as an alternative waste energy fuel. And we were supplying under contract to Harmac Pulp and Paper up in Squamish. It took a year to put it all together.
Okay. So today, so we know, like, for example, like the mills end up using everything they have at the mill gets used. They use up their sawdust, they use up their chips and stuff like that. A lot of that gets put somewhere, right? But when you talk about stuff like you're saying construction waste or even residual from harvesting, so actual full timber left in the cut block that ends up getting piled up and burnt. So you're trying to find a way to collect these resources that are just going to the dump or being burnt off, and create a resource and reuse them somehow, right?
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
So the biggest wood waste generators of wood waste, period, in Canada are still forest industry. And the forest industry is broken into sectors which is called woodlands or timberlands. So you're out in the forest harvesting on a lease site or a cut. Your wood waste that's coming, or your wood that's coming back to the mill, whether it be OSB, Paralam, dimensional lumber, the wood waste, period, that's left behind in a lease site or woodlands, log deck, that's what we're targeting to figure out logistically, cost efficiently, how to get it back to the local market and develop the reuse markets for that said wood recyclable material. The second industry that's the largest wood waste generator would be municipal landfills, because they accept it from residential, commercial, industrial.
Yeah.
But
so just people bring in their furniture, their construction material, and just throwing it in the dump, right?
And their trees, their branches, your urban companies that are doing the clearings on the right of ways and whatnot. Power
it blew
lines.
my mind. The first time someone told me that, like a few weeks ago, someone told me that I remember I brought wood to the dump as well. I always assumed that they took that and created a biofuel or did something with it, but it turns out they just burn it. And I was like, well, that seems like a complete waste when you could be harvesting that energy and creating a product out of it, right?
Absolutely. No, what it is, I was interviewed a few months ago by CBC Toronto asking about the recycling industry. And in this case, they were asking about the GTA, Greater Toronto area. Why is there not more wood waste recycling? And we have companies and members through our business group, Canadian Wood Waste Recycling Business Group, in the Toronto and the Ontario region that provide different types of wood recycling services, whether it be mobile grinding, screening, or shredding, portable sawmilling, portable kilning, reusing the wood. And the reason when we look at governmental with their landfills, it's a lack of education and understanding to sit down and actually do a bit of a feasibility study and understand that there is a reuse market for used wood waste. Again, the furniture, the pallets, the dunnage, the cable spools, the forestry, trees,
I think it's
branches.
just been easy. It was just easy for them to burn it, right? And they weren't really thinking about it. So it takes someone like yourself to recognize that this is and like I said, I was telling you earlier, right? Like I had a conversation in university regarding slash piles and cut blocks and how can we utilize those slash piles as another resource, right? And the problem was always transportation, and it was just too expensive. It didn't make sense. So, I guess you're working on a means to fix that problem, right?
Well, and how it works in each province, each territory, region by region, because of the different types of fiber supply, the reuse markets that are currently there for technologies, which is generally waste energy right now. It's so small in Canada. We're an over-consuming, in my opinion, throwaway society when it comes to recycling wood waste, period. We're about 14, 15 years behind the resource recoveries of wood waste as in comparison to Europeans.
Okay.
And it's been because we're in the greatest country and province in the world, in my world. But what it is we've been till early 90s an over-consuming throwaway society. When we first created urban wood waste back in 1994-95 in South Vancouver, there was no cardboard recycling, no paper. We also created that as well in working with local governments. And so it's really only been Canada as a whole, as a nation, where we've been recycling materials that are recoverable only since the early 90s. So yes, as a business group and myself, we're bringing people together internationally with their resources, their technologies, their skill set, their equipment to help us region by region conduct the feasibility studies, help to create and identify the prospective reuse markets, and then develop them.
Okay. So let's go through a couple examples here. So, for example, I don't know if we want to tackle this one first. What we've been talking about, so we'll tackle this one first. So we're talking about like slash piles in cut blocks or lease sites. So so for people that don't understand what that is, that's wood material that is like it's branches and broken trees and undersized wood, that kind of stuff. So there's a bunch of slash that's usually piled up and burned on site so that it doesn't create a hazard for animals walking through and all kinds of stuff like that. So this is something, like I said, I've thought about quite a bit. Like, how do we do this? Do we take that wood, chip it, haul it? Do we haul it whole? Do we create something on site? Do we have a portable mill that goes around collecting that and turning it into energy? Like, what's the solution? Because I know the problem was always, they said it wasn't economically feasible to haul that wood to a mill to turn it into something. So unless it's economically feasible, as our society is not going to do it.
Right.
So what's the solution with that one?
So the solutions are, again, region by region. When you identify, we'll say, the woodlands, the logging, the forest industry, the residual that's left behind, as you identify, it's too small for dimensional lumber processing and market. So what's left behind would be where we would go in and conduct a feasibility study. Some of the technology would be the LiDAR, as in, what did you call it?
Remote sensing.
Remote sensing is to be able to do a grid flyby, fly over, generally with a remote drone, or of course it could be a helicopter. And when you fly and do your grid patterns, you can identify how much wood residual that's salvageable, that's left behind, could be created into a new local reuse market. The biggest cost, again, is creating those reuse markets and identifying them, which is a starting point. So again, a feasibility study. From there, you look at what are the reuse markets. If we're able to come out to the lease site or bring the material back to town and look at what would be the reuse markets. One would be portable sawmilling. And the individuals, we have members that provide portable sawmilling. They own and operate their own kiln system. So they would potentially, in, let's say, a city like Edmonton, the urban forest in the city of Edmonton might take down 400 to 600 damaged trees per year. And it could be maple, it could be elm, whatever it may be. And unfortunately, they typically at this time generally grind it up or bury it or landfill it. And we've had companies that approach different governmentals to say, well, we would take your wood waste, your trees that are salvageable, and we'd rough cut them and kiln dry them for 6 to 8 weeks, and then build and create new markets for beautiful hardwood materials as well as softwood. So you get into more of the remote communities, it's a little tougher to create the reuse markets. But the reuse markets there's three. There's the barnwood industry sector, where you take used wood waste from a construction of an old building, whatnot, you sort and you separate it. You compare your costs, that if you've got some beams and trusses, 2x6, 2x4 studs used, what would the cost be to buy new? So you cut your costs and say, okay, I've got salvageable wood that could be reused even for construction, rebuilding. If you're going to get into beams and trusses, you have to get them re-engineered. But so you can go back into construction for building waste wood material, or you can go to cosmetic. And on the barnwood, that's an industry sector that's taken off because people
they love it,
the look of used wood,
and they're willing to pay lots of money for it.
And yeah, so in Greater Edmonton alone, there's about half a dozen barnwood companies that are starting up. Most of the cases, they start in their own home, their garage. They pick up a small acreage and then start to provide services. That's an industry sector, small, growing across Canada, the barnwood.
So those guys just going around finding old dilapidated barns and asking the landowner permission to remove the wood?
In a lot of cases, yes. And then in other cases, they'll work with companies that are in the construction demolition industry and say, we'd like to work with you. We'll take your wood waste that's salvageable. And of course, some of the demolition companies, well, will you give us money for it? They can usually work out the numbers depending on the volumes. Absolutely. The next industry sector is the portable sawmilling, both urban and rural. Yeah. You can take used wood, damaged trees, old beams, trusses that have come down, and if you need to repurpose them, so we call that portable sawmilling. If it's green, then it has to be kiln dried. But it's a growing industry, and in general, we've got a number of members that have and manufacture portable sawmill systems in British Columbia and Ontario and across Canada. So the portable sawmilling industry, one, yes, they could potentially go out to an actual lease site, process on site. They'd still have to bring it back for rough cut to kiln it. Or you bring that, let's say, salvageable timber back to the local community, to the said individual that has the business of a kiln and a saw system portable, and they create those reuse markets locally. Gotcha.
So what about the stuff? So that was the undersized cuts. What about the other biomass, the branches and all that stuff that can't be turned into lumber?
Good point, Matthew. So that's the end of life of wood. So you got the barnwood, which is your first consideration, if it makes economic in dollars and cents and logistics.
Yeah.
Second industry reuse market for consideration is portable sawmilling, kiln drying, and then custom selling your beautiful wood. The end of life is grinding, screening, and shredding.
Okay.
So we'll call it reprocessing. So that's your biggest reuse market currently globally, is you'll take your different types of wood waste and you'll, again, do your feasibility study, identify how much there is, whether it be a lease site or a log deck, process it on site, or do you bring it back to a local site in town and process? So you've got equipment and technologies where you can grind, screen, shred, and hammer mill. Most of your manufacturers like Vermeer Canada, Durkop, it goes on and on. When they one pass and load up, let's say an old pallet or your wood residual, one pass will usually get it screened down to 4-inch minus. So that limits you at 4-inch minus. What can you reuse it for? The metal gets pulled out if there happens to be metal in, let's say, rig mats, pallets, dunnage, construction, demolition. You can pull out 98% of the metal, and so it's separated. But
what's dunnage?
So dunnage is the blocking used in trucking and transport for your skids and your pallets. So that's usually your 4-inch by 6-inch and 8-foot lengths. And it's usually oak from Louisiana, from the swamp oaks. It's been in the industry where companies in the southern states created a reuse market for oak out of the swamps. It's twisted and curved, and it's not very good for building with, but they're the largest producer of dunnage. Being it's oak, it will take the heavy payloads on a flat deck or in a tractor trailer system enclosed or whatever. So that's your dunnage. Gotcha. So yeah, taking wood waste, grinding, screening, shredding, and looking at the reuse markets is, again, if you can get it down small enough format, you end up making 2 passes, but then the cost goes up. What the manufacturers for the Alberta and our developing or our emerging wood processing and recycling industry are looking to develop is, with the right screens and the right cleaning systems and brushes so they don't plug up, is if we can get wood, then you can take your pallets, your dunnage, your cable spools. Here in Alberta, there's an approximate, without proper study being conducted, but there's rig mats and access mats, which are generally manufactured out of fir, out of British Columbia. Your typical access rig mat longevity is about 1.5 years. And then what do you do with it? Over 90% are landfilled or non-essentially burned in Alberta.
Such a shame it's just so strange to me that's what we've been. I mean, I get it. It just went out of sight, right? People weren't really thinking about it. It wasn't like they were trying to be, evil or anything. They just kind of forgot. It
is. And it's a lack of education, and where we come in, creating that reuse market for the end product. Once you process it, recycled it, creating those new reuse markets, that's our biggest challenge. And that's
just it. If there's no place for it to go, then what are they supposed to do with it, right?
So we know at the end of life, through our business group a couple of years ago, one of our mat companies members conducted a feasibility study, not including Fort Mac or Conklin because they hadn't sold or rented mats into that region, but approximate in the rest of Alberta, at the end of every 2 years, there's 1.9 to 2.2 million mats that are being non-essentially burned or landfilled.
Really? And those mats are big. They're what? They're 12 or 20 by...
In a lot of cases, they're the standard depth of, let's say, 12, 14 inches. 8 inches even in some cases, because now they're making mats that have no metal in them. It's called glulam.
Yeah.
They'll lay those mats down, and they would interlock end on end, and they're typically 8 inches deep and an 8 foot wide, so they can be roadable haulage. and they'll put two side by side and then interlock these mats, and they can run 30, 40 miles in the bush.
I guess we should explain what this is for people who don't know. So in Alberta, we've got a lot of swamp. And in order for companies to get into swampy areas without causing environmental damage, they lay down all of these mats. They're big pieces of wood so that trucks and tractors and stuff can drive on it and not cause damage to the vegetation and soil underneath.
Absolutely.
So that's what that's for. It's for environmental protection. And
yeah, it's been legislated in Alberta that if you don't have access into a site, whether it be gas, forestry, mining, and the access is not through gravel road that's naturally there, you have to lay down your access road mats, because yes, as you identified, it's about environmental protection.
Yeah.
And now the province of Saskatchewan is looking at legislating that as well.
Yeah.
So the industry of manufacturing rig access mats is growing. And I mean, as mentioned, we know that there's close to 2.5 million mats just in Alberta every 2 years that are being non-essentially burned to landfill. So the same philosophy would be, we need to go into a region. Potentially, we would divide the province of Alberta into 8 regions and create and educate the end users that have the mats and bring them back to a central location. And from that, we can look at remilling, grinding, screening, but creating reuse markets for that wood waste.
Okay.
That's just one industry sector, as mentioned earlier in the conversation. So you've got forestry is the largest industry waste producer. Your logging, your forestry, your woodlands, your log sort yards. The mills are pretty good. They recover and reuse 90% of their wood waste, but the other 10, 15%, even at the mills, they're still not reusing it. And then you get into what's called coastal milling. You have salt water, where the logs are coming in through the ocean, and there is no reuse for any type of wood or bark that has salt in it. And we're working with the Alberta government through Alberta Innovates to look at research government development programs for companies like Weyerhaeuser, Canfor, that on the coastal side, we can create a technology where that salt in wood can be reused. Currently, it's all just buried. You can't burn it because of salt.
Yeah.
So the logging forestry industry, as mentioned, is the biggest still producer of wood waste that we're working with to develop reuse programs and services for across Canada. The second industry is governmental landfills, because that's where the wood waste from residential commercial ends up. And again, we're working with the municipalities and local governments and federals and provincials. And at this time, in my own opinion, the federal government generally looks at waste energy and solar as the two leading technologies to look at resource management. So you've got wind and solar. Biomass, waste energy, it's pretty much non-existent when it comes to support from the federal government. Alberta government is starting to recognize and do have programs and initiatives and some great partnerships.
I know there's lots of research being done. Like I had a podcast with Marty Lukert. He's an economist from the University of Alberta, and he was doing research in ethanol for use with creating ethanol from wood waste, right? And he hasn't come to a conclusion personally yet, but he says this is a potential place for this wood to go is ethanol production, because 10% of all our gasoline has ethanol, right? Which is
Absolutely.
Actually increases the efficiency of gasoline and a bunch of other stuff. So it's a good thing. People look at it as the companies being cheap and throwing ethanol in there to bring down their margins, but it's actually better. Apparently, from what I've been told, it's actually better for,
a better burn,
efficiency.
and then what exhaust emissions you do get, it's a lesser greenhouse gas emission.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's we put on a workshop, Canadian Wood Waste Recycling Workshop Expo, May 3rd and 4th in Airdrie this year. And one of the presenters I brought in was WestJet, and people that were not up to speed on all the reuse markets for the industry as wood recycling. WestJet, along with Qantas Airlines out of Australia, are two world leaders that have actually made alternative waste energy fuels from wood waste and other organic living material like the grains and so on and so forth.
Corn,
Yep.
Corn
so
is the big one, right?
They've actually had test flights. So it's proven it does work. When you get into the cellular level of wood, it's called lignin.
Yeah.
And we have a number of members that are university. When it comes to university and nonprofit, with our business group, we don't charge a membership fee. It's our way of giving back to encouraging development. So we have a number of members globally, as well as here in Alberta, that are under research and development. They need the funding to build a pilot facility to take the solid wood waste and turn it into an alternative liquid fuel. So it's an emerging industry.
So, yeah, and that's exactly what I've been told too. I can't remember. I wish I had just listened to the one with Marty, because he had explained, we had talked about this, creating a site to bring all this wood and create biofuels out of it. I can't remember if his conclusion was that we needed one big one or a bunch of small ones. I think he said one big one was the way to go. So if you're going to create one big one, we'd have to, I'm trying to imagine how to feasibly bring in wood from, say, high level down to wherever this mill might be, say it's in Slave Lake or Whitecourt or something. How do you make that feasible?
It would have to be multiple locations. So we would potentially, and it is under development, Grand Prairie through the local college up there, university, Calgary, Edmonton. There are negotiations taking place in Alberta, here in Edmonton, out towards Sherwood Park and the industrial. A number of partners are looking to build a private wood recycling research facility.
Yeah.
And it would be on, let's say, 20 acres. Then the government will come in and help fund both federal, provincial, and municipal as well.
Right.
And then the applications would be to get the grant and the funding for these companies and individuals that have this technology. So, again, the biggest cost in recycling, whether it be pop bottles, whether it be plastics, cardboard, wood waste, is collection and then logistics to the site where you're going to facilitate. So, generally, any further than on the logistical side of either gathering your wood waste, bringing it to a staging area to recycle it, any further out than, let's say, 75 to 100K, it's negative.
Yeah.
So that's where and why we as a business group, we work with membership municipalities and it's again, region by region, province by province. So it's usually within a 150 kilometer radius. We look at the wood waste, identify the types, and then try and create through consultancy what are the feasible reuse markets to be developed.
Yeah.
So again, it's forestry, municipal landfills, and then in Alberta, the third largest producer of wood waste is the oil and gas industry. And they accumulate pallets, dunnage, rig mats, cable spools. And again, they landfill and burn because there's no reuse market. We are working with some of the big oil companies like Suncor. We can reduce that wood waste, grind, screen, shred it, get it down to half-inch minus. Then it can be sold as a reusable product in what's called the drilling waste industry and the hazmat sludge mix-off. So in the oil,
let's explain what that means.
Yes. So in the oil and gas industry, in drilling, since the beginning of the industry in the late 1800s in Texas and now up here in Alberta, when you're doing your drilling, you need to mix off to bring up your sludge and your residual, your liquid bitumen, whatnot, is they use sawdust. It solidifies, you can pump it, you bring it back up. But once you bring up at a drill site your liquid waste, your hazmat, they mix it off with sawdust and shavings, and then they haul it off to a waste management company like Trevita, Secure, so on and so forth, and they bury it. Whereas so it's all good. That's the way the industry currently works. But what we're saying, instead of using virgin sawdust and shavings from a lumber mill, let's start considering processing and recycling used wood waste, your pallets, your dunnage, your cable spools, your wood waste, but we need to get it down to half-inch minus. And again, the technology so far for the manufacturers, as mentioned earlier, your Dopsteads, your Vermeer Canadas, your Peterson Pacific, they're working on it. They haven't really looked at the oil and gas industry as a drilling waste, where they're working on it.
Right.
So that's a big industry sector that, again, instead of as a reuse market, and then we kind of alluded a little bit here in Alberta. We're based in Stony Plain. Here we are today in Edmonton at your office. Pinnacle Pellet out of Prince George. They're the largest pellet manufacturer for industrial pellet manufacturing for heating purposes in Canada.
So is that for commercial use, or is that
commercial and residential?
Oh, okay.
Their main focus has been commercial, and Pinnacle, going on approximately 14 years ago, when they started in Prince George and they built their first pellet mill, they would take only virgin sawdust and shaving.
Virgin sawdust meaning just from the tree,
right from the mill.
From the mill.
and they would create wood pellets. And from there, they would transport it down the west coast of North America through the Panama Canal and then sell it off to end users in Europe as a waste energy product.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the more recent years, let's say in the last 2 years, Pinnacle Energy has signed contracts to supply the countries, Japan, India, China, and South Korea, with industrial-grade wood heating pellets. And so just recently, they had the official grand opening in Entwistle, Alberta. It's their second largest wood pellet manufacturing facility out of their empire of 8 wood pellet manufacturing facilities. So there's 7 in British Columbia. This is the first for Pinnacle here in Alberta. When they're up to full production, they'll be filling up their pellet cars, which is very similar to a grain car, and they'll be producing 100 rail cars a month of wood pellet in Entwistle. Now, where did they find this wood fiber supply? They went out, negotiated with companies like Weyerhaeuser Drayton Valley as their largest producer of supplying them with sawdust and shavings, and other mills in Whitecourt and even Edson. They've talked, but the logisticals doesn't make sense to haul it that far. It cuts into the cost of manufacturing, the profitability. So Pinnacle themselves, it's again a wood pellet reuse waste to energy.
The wood pellets is a huge one. Like, I know even in my family growing up, like, we had a wood pellet stove in the basement just because it was, well, the idea of it is good, right? Like, it's carbon neutral, right? Because and all that kind of stuff. But like, it creates you can just put a bag in there and it burns perfectly for like 10, 12 hours in those stoves, right? They're a great little machine.
The biggest challenge and why the pellet industry is big in certain countries, certain regions of Canada. And one of the reasons it hasn't grown wood pellet, even residential commercial in Alberta, BC, is because the cost to produce our natural gas. But so yet
low. It is low. I just realized today how low it is relative to other provinces or even the States. Like, it's crazy how low it is. Yeah.
It in reality, though, if a person was able to go in and do the analytical testing, so BTU, British Thermal Unit, which is your burning temperature of what a fuel would burn at. And natural gas doesn't burn as hot as wood waste.
Right.
So you're actually wood waste properly dried and processed, whether it be a wood pellet or it be a hog fuel, has more thermal value and is actually more efficient.
That comes down to ease of use for people, right? They're like, if I have natural gas, like, I just turn the knob and we're good to go, right? Whereas wood requires me to haul bags, buy bags, bring them down, load it in. So it's like more work. People don't like that idea, right? So unfortunately,
it's human nature is convenience.
Yeah, totally convenience. Yeah,
it is. But on the industrial scale,
just bring this closer.
And commercial.
You can lean back. Just bring it close with you when you move.
On the commercial industrial side, again, the waste to energy, hog fuel, wood pellet, it is growing, and as companies produce and conduct their feasibility studies, it is a growing industry, and that's why we're here to talk about.
No, it's huge. I think like the potential for all that wood waste to be utilized as whether it's ethanol or just reused again as construction, or just the longer we can keep wood fiber tied up, the longer we keep that carbon tied up, and the more it's used, and it's beautiful, and it's like it's green, right? Like, all these is all positive. So the longer we keep that wood fiber tied up and keep it from burning and just going into the atmosphere. If you burn it to create and collect that energy, turn that into a fuel or an energy source, then you're utilizing that, right?
Absolutely.
But just burning it out in the bush or wherever, it seems like a waste.
Or landfill.
Or burying it, yeah.
It's the biggest challenge is educating people to listen up and look at their options.
So what would you say to the individual? Is there anything that individuals can do to try and, like, say someone's, say someone's building a house and they got a bunch of construction materials that the contractor just leaves there, and you know what I mean? The first idea would be, let's bring it to the dump. What could that person do if they wanted to be more green about this?
On a municipal level, again, where the industry is at when you have construction, demolition, wood waste is landfill. So again, our biggest challenge is working with local government and getting their attention where they'll actually sit down with a consultancy firm and actually listen and say, okay, you're bringing in X amount of metric tons, or 20, 30, some of the larger landfills are bringing a couple hundred loads of different size wood waste materials per day.
Yeah.
And they don't understand and haven't put the time in to conduct the studies to say, well, so a lot of our wood we could use as barn wood and sell it. Yeah. We even have private people that have approached these governments and said, we'll take that wood waste for nothing.
Well, Eric Jensen, he's Relic Woodworks. So I had Eric on. And so you know Eric, obviously. So he was
yes.
So yeah. So I just saw him last week, but I had him on a podcast, and we were talking about he's been taking lumber and making beautiful pieces of live edge wood for people, right? And
so he's got a portable sawmill system, kiln, and he's approached local cities as well and said, "Listen, you're landfilling beautiful wood. I'll take it for nothing."
Yeah.
And they've turned him away. And then he's gone back to them and said, "Look, I'll even pay you so much a linear foot." And they've said, we're not interested. Mm-hmm. So it's a lack of education at a governmental level and a corporate level that it's my own opinion, but not to pick on men, but generally when you've got men in a position of authority and they're 50 years of age and older, and this is my own experience dealing with people internationally, you bring a new proposal to them, a new industry, an option, here's what we can do to be more positive, more economic, more social. For every 50 men that are in that position, you might find one. They're at that age where they're talking retirement.
Yeah,
they're in their comfort zone.
In innovating. Yeah.
And it's a harsh reality. And a lot of people say, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But when you talk to enough people internationally, federal governments, municipal, I used to go to counties every year, half a dozen, do a presentation saying, we'd like to encourage you to stop landfilling your wood waste. We'll help you through our business group to create reuse programs and services.
Yeah.
So one, you're not filling up the landfills, which to get an application and build a new cell, you're looking at minimum $12.5 million per cell. So let's eliminate those costs.
That's the land?
That's the landfill cost to put in a proper cell with leachate, pumps, remediation.
Oh, the
actual landfill where you put your garbage.
Yes, put the garbage. I got you.
An average cost in Alberta is $12.5 million per cell.
Because it's just like a concrete hole they create, basically, right?
Yeah, it's generally clay with liners and pumps and whatnot, and then off to the side you'll have what's called a leachate pond, and this will tie in as well to what we're doing on wood recycling. So you got your leachate pond. So when you got your landfill, you get snow, you get rain, and then you got your liquid slowly breaking down, biodegradable, but the liquid's falling through down to the bottom of the cell, which could be 60, 70 feet deep. Then the pumps take it and they pump it into a leachate pond, which is half the size of an Olympic swimming pool. That leachate is also 100% recyclable with current and upcoming technologies. One is willow. If you were to take in layman terms, willow that's between 1 and 4 year old, and you shave and chip it and pulp it up and you mix it with that leachate proportionately, 3 to 4 months later, it's absorbed it and it can now be used as a fuel or soil remediation. And
so we're talking, what's in the leachate? What's the properties of the leachate pond?
The leachate, so it's municipal garbage.
Right. So
you got
what
paint,
is it?
You got paint, you got oil, you got petroleum, you've got.
So it's highly combustible, is what you're saying.
Not even combustible. It could be some of it. Yeah, aerosol cans, obviously, but when the
garbage dry, I mean, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, but people throw away, and some of the landfills don't really scrutinize the garbage that's going in the landfill. It just comes in, they dump it, and they bury it.
Yeah.
So you get some pretty nasty, hazardous stuff. Dating myself here, but back in the early 80s in Vernon, I was working for a surveying company, environmental, and we were surveying the landfill in Kelowna. And we're talking liquid. We had the hip waders on. We didn't have the respirators, which nowadays it would be mandatory to have the health and safety, but we were surveying the landfill and the leachate, and oh my, it's nasty stuff. It's carcinogenic and everything else. But so in layman terms,
what happens with that leachate pond?
Well, right now they pump it, they filter it, and then what'll happen is when it gets close to a meterage where it's overflowing or it's got to be hauled out, we have special companies that come in and they'll pump out that leachate. And then they'll haul it to special government landfill. There's one up northern Alberta here. And they take that liquid leachate and they mix it with sawdust and shavings and they burn it. And then they bury it. And it's a government program. Swan Hills.
Burning that can't be super great for the...
Well, they're burning it.
Emissions.
But and again, you'd have to get the reports and the air emissions and all that stuff. But Swan Hills has a government facility. It's the only one in Alberta where they haul this liquid waste. They blend it with their sawdust and their shavings, and they burn it. And they're not making any waste energy, even from the heat that they could generate from the power. They just bury the ash, and it's nasty stuff as well. So it's unfortunate that with your landfills, they have to pay money to have that leachate hauled away because there's no reuse. But yet, the technology out of Sweden is willow plantation. And if you were to take willow and you chip and bark it up and all that, and you mix it with any type of leachate, even solid waste, it'll become somewhat benign within 3 to 4 months and can be used as a solid fuel or even blended back into the earth as a soil remediation product.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. So that's so soil remediation. So like, is that like, it would be like mixing biochar type thing?
Absolutely. So
into
there's
the soil?
Yes. Yeah, so biochar, there's another industry reuse. Because again, when we look at, you got the barn wood where you're repurposing and reusing and inventorying and reselling your beautiful wood for reuse applications for construction and decorative, structural, if you get the beams and trusses re-engineered. Then you've got the recapping, you've got the portable sawmilling. But at end of life, when you're grinding, screening, and shredding and reprocessing, one of the reuses is, again, soil site remediation. You can take different types of wood waste, grind it, screen it, shred it. In this case, willow. They've been working on this for 30 years in Sweden and perfected it. So now we have a member out of Vancouver Island who has the proprietary distribution rights for Western Canada. And they've been approaching local governments for every landfill and their leachate ponds to help remediate and save cost and money and reuse that leachate, blending it with the...
So what's the benefit of mixing it with soils?
Well, again, you would mix your leachate and other waste materials with the right offset, such as the willow, and again, now it's a reusable product as opposed to being just buried or landfilled.
So what would it be reused for? I mean, like what's like
soil site remediation, so reclamation. So
yeah.
So
just explain what remediation means. I'm not sure. Yeah.
So remediation is like when you have in Alberta here, we've got an oil lease platform, and they drill down and they've got a platform that's usually anywhere from 300 to 400 loads of gravel.
Okay.
And you build her up to about 30, 40 feet deep of this gravel. Mm-hmm. Then you put your bridge, you put your rig mats on top of that so that your heavy drilling equipment doesn't waver. It goes up and down and drills at 3,600 meters plus to get down to the oil. And these platforms are generally the size of 4 CFL football fields.
Okay.
And so when they're done all their drilling and they take all the platforms off, such as your rig mats, your bridge mats, they actually haul that 300-400 loads of gravel to the next site on that same site and build it up again, because it's usually swampy. If we say Meg Energy, Christina Lake up that way. But when it comes back to cleaning up the drilling site, once you pull all that gravel off, if it's swampy, they have to remediate it. Legislation is you want to bring it back to as close to natural as it was before you came onto that site. So
reclaim it.
Reclaim it. So
yeah.
So if you can take your wood waste, screen it, clean it, and it will speed up the process. Same thing.
So you're decompressing and adding more nutrients into the soil.
So the soil recovery and the plant life and the organic growth retains itself. Absolutely.
So actually putting that stuff back into the soil is going to bring in more nutrients and allow for more holding of nutrients so that the plant life can come back and it become more natural again. Okay. I just wanted to, I wasn't sure, I wasn't clear on what you meant by remediation, but I guess reclamation purposes is a better way to...
And I mean, again, the Alberta government does an amazing job on the environmental side, most governments in Canada, as far as remediation. Again, if you've been on a site, clean it up. Same with the rig mats. If you're going to build a rig mat road, whether it be 5 kilometers or 50, when you pull those mats off, you have to go back in and remediate that land just a little bit, remediate it, bring in some topsoil. It's like in Alberta, there's 300 type species of what's called Alberta sphagnum peat moss.
Yes,
and it's an amazing natural product. You don't take it while it's still doing its thing in remediating the waste material, which would be, again, the peat moss doing its thing. It's usually swampy lands. But, again, a lot of peat moss can be taken from an old peat moss area, and you can bring it, it's still alive, but you can use it for soil site remediation as well. So wood waste, chipped sawdust shavings. It's been, again, chipped and cleaned and whatnot. It's great for regeneration on roads and forests and soil remediation.
Well, I had Chris Olson on one of the first podcasts I ever did, and biochar guy, right? And we were talking about, the benefits of biochar and that kind of stuff. So he's one person that's trying to innovate and create a new use for exactly what you're talking about, taking unused wood waste, turning it into something useful. So right now we're really, so for example, like the person who's building a house and has a bunch of wood waste, they don't want to put it in the dump. There's really no options for them. So what we're trying to do is give them options.
Absolutely. So through the Canadian Wood Waste Recycling Business Group and our members, and I think we're just up over 140 members internationally, and each and every member has a specialized service in the industry, whether it be biochar, like Chris Olson, he's a member. And I'll explain a little bit about the biochar, but we have companies that are like Vermeer Canada. So they're a manufacturer out of the States, and they provide wood grinding, screening, shredding, recycling equipment, both for forestry, logging, construction, demolition, agricultural. So each and every member, that's what we do through our business group, is we connect them to government jobs, private jobs. We get leads, we get tenders saying somebody wants to recycle their wood waste. We interconnect and we introduce. And then we promote each and every member's services through our own social media group.
So the melting pot of the minds, trying to create the opportunity for these industries to grow so that Joe Schmo can get rid of his wood, sustainably. That's the idea.
Absolutely. Bringing people together to build the new industry called CanadianWoodRecycling.ca. It's going to take a few years, but here in Alberta, if we go to the Calgary region, we've got half a dozen members down there that are actually wood recycling facilities, and they've created the reuse markets. And so Calgary is very sustainable in being able to take all their construction, demolition, wood waste within city limits, and they have reuse for it all. Edmonton, awesome. we have one legitimate waste energy company called Biofuels. They're out at Northlands landfill, which is owned and operated by Canadian Energy. So they'll bring in, at $70 a ton, you can bring in mixed wood waste, pallets, dunnage, cable spools, furniture, wood as in green, stumps, branches, trees, you name it. They grind, screen, and process the equivalent of 7 to 8 walking floor trailer loads a day, and they get it down to 3-inch minus, pull all the metals out, separate the metals, and take the metals in for recovery. Plastic, same thing. But daily, they'll send their 7 to 8 loads a day of beautiful processed, ground up wood waste to their sister company called DAP Power, which is up about 40 minutes northwest of Edmonton, north between Barhead and Westlock, in a little hamlet. There's nothing there. It's not even a hamlet, but DAP Power. So DAP Power takes wood waste and has for a number of years. It's now American owned and operated, and they produce enough electricity to power 8,000 homes an hour. So they're our largest Greater Edmonton wood recycling facilitator that's closed loop.
So somebody wanted to, they could technically bring their wood waste directly to them?
No. Okay. Everything has to go, yes, their wood waste can go, yes, to biofuels at the Northlands landfill, absolutely.
And they'll take it there.
Right. And then, so you take it to Northlands landfill on the north side of 16A, just outside the city limits, west side of Edmonton. And you scale in it, west side of Edmonton, yeah.
The Northlands landfill, I don't even know.
So you've got two landfills.
Is that the main one right on the other side of the Yellowhead there?
Yeah.
Like the big mountain of garbage?
That was the city of Edmonton, and it's closed.
Oh, okay.
It's capped off. So when you're on Stony Plain Road heading towards Spruce Grove, that's 16A.
Right.
So as you leave the city limits and you go past the Winterburn Industrial, you go down the hill, and as you're coming up the next hill, there's two landfills. One on the south side is Chola, and they were not a recycling landfill. It was strictly garbage. They buried. It's been capped off, and stories are and rumors and indications are it'll become soccer fields. But on the north side of that two landfills is Northlands, and they take any type of wood waste, non-treated.
So bring your wood there.
Bring your wood there, $70 a ton.
Okay.
City of Edmonton does the same, but they're not recycling all their wood waste for reuse programs, unfortunately, at this time.
You say $70 a ton, that's what it costs?
Per metric ton. When you come in, whether it be a car, truck, a tractor, trailer, they scale it in and base it on $70 per metric ton, TONNE, I should say. We go back to Chris Olson and talk about biochar. So biochar is another product. So you take your used wood waste. Chris created a machine called the Ulysses. Going back about 5 years ago. He built it in Edmonton. And in the biochar as a technology, you basically, in layman terms, you take your wood and you char it. You know how when you have a fire and you get it going and you notice the wood starting to turn black, and it's charred, you stop. You don't go any further than you just char that wood. It's
basically there's no oxygen or very little oxygen in the system, so it's just enough to slow burn it and not create a flame. It just kind of chars.
You char it, you cook it, just like a steak. I mean, if you want your steak well done and it's burnt, that's called char. And so Chris created the Ulysses back again 5-6 years ago, and you would put your wood waste in it. It would be the equivalent of a...
Just bring that mic just close. Just bring it with you. You don't have to, you can lean back. You can enjoy yourself.
So Chris created this unit, and it would be like a roll-off container. It'd be like a 40 cubic yard roll-off, totally enclosed. So you feed your wood waste into it, and it cooks slowly and chars and produces this biochar.
It's continuous too. I know. I think he tries to keep it as a continuous
24/7.
Yeah,
absolutely. So you have a loader or an automated conveyor system where it's feeding your wood waste continually. We have another member, Jamie Bakos, and he has a company called Titan Clean Energy, and he's out of Creek, Saskatchewan. Currently, he's the largest biochar producer in Western Canada.
Gotcha.
So biochar, once you've charred it and produced it, the reuse applications it can be used for water filtration, sort of like a Brita filter.
Yeah.
It can be used as soil amendment, and it can be used as a fuel.
Yeah.
So when we say soil amendment, when a farmer takes a field and he's got his crop and harvest off it, he's got to go in, he's got to till it, he's got to disc it, harrow it, whatever it may be, he'll add some different fertilizers and nitrogen and different things to the field to speed up the recovery so that he can put a new crop in it. If you take and put biochar in, Mother Nature would take about 1 year to 2 years to regenerate that field and that soil so that it'd be good for growing again. Whereas if you put biochar in, your recovery is half of that. So you're looking at 6 to 8 months of recovery, and that nutrient balance it's incredible. So again, biochar, and again, in layman terms, can be used as a soil regenerative product. It can be used as a fuel. Once it's been charred, it actually will burn hotter and quicker, slower than just a piece of wood would in a fire. And then water filtration with the proper thing. You can use it for farming, drinking water as a filtration. Biochar has been around since the beginning of time. Mother Nature, when she creates, unfortunate, and it is what it is, but you create a forest fire. Generally, when they burn hot and fast, she's creating biochar for regeneration purposes. So it also pops the seeds open, doesn't destroy the cones. The actual seeds and the soil will regenerate faster than if there was no forest fire.
Considering it doesn't burn out all the duff layer.
True, very true.
Yeah, but yeah, no, the biochar is a fascinating. Like I think I had a whole lot more than an hour long conversation with Chris about what it is and how it works and what the benefit is. So, no, that's awesome that you guys are involved, because I think that's another potential use for wood waste that might be
absolutely.
Yeah,
there's half a dozen technologies emerging, and are. As an emerging technology, as proven for those that have been doing this before us in different industries, whether it be electronics, styrofoam recycling, paint, plastics, goes on and on. It takes time to develop, and as the new technologies emerge, they're very expensive.
Yeah,
it's a numbers game. Until more units are out there in the proven technologies, and that's where we come in as a group, is providing educational information so that people can make an informed decision in what portion of the industry do they want to get involved in and encourage. And it is growing. It's wood recycling is a sustainable industry. It'll just recently in the last 4 years, they built the world's tallest freestanding wood structure.
That's right. Yeah.
Down at the University of British Columbia. It's changed the building engineering codes.
Yeah, totally.
They found that structurally, with the technologies and the resources and the different types of wood that you can use, when it comes to an earthquake or the natural disaster, this new type of wood building construction technology will stand up better than concrete and steel.
Yeah, because it has more give, and it doesn't it has something to do with the strain. So the tensile strength. So so when steel starts to bend, it loses almost all of its structure, right? Whereas wood will give a little bit more, and so Yeah, or something like that.
Yes.
I don't know.
No,
I had a whole podcast about that too somewhere down the line.
Very good. No, it's and you take companies like Weyerhaeuser on looking at different reuses for wood waste. They created a product going back 30 years ago. They had sawdust and shavings. There was things like particle board, MDF, and then a few years back they created what's called Paralam.
Mm-hmm.
So they take pieces of wood, a little longer chips, and they use a glue resin. And they specialize in making beams and trusses, and the strength is.
Oh yeah, the strength of some of the new technologies that they have coming on. Like I had Dalibor Hudek on from
FP
Innovations, and he was showing us all the different type of construction material that they're creating by, like basically through a pulp process. They pull out the lignin and the cellulose, and then create like concrete type things. They can create all kinds of wild innovations, right, that are coming out through just separating those two ingredients and creating something new out of it. So the potential for like wood, and like we said, like wood is the most sustainable building material we have, right? Like it's perfectly sustainable and it's green. Like I want to promote the use of wood as much as I can, considering it's sustainable harvest, right?
Absolutely.
Which we do in Canada and the United States and Europe and stuff. But
Mother Nature gave us a gift.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of the old expression, slow down, take enough time to smell the roses. And all the answers in my life lie within Mother Nature for everything. And some friends think I'm maybe in a life before I was a tree, but wood waste, again, it is, as you identified, Matthew, it's a sustainable resource. It's closed loop. It's there forever. And it's for us not to abuse, but to use properly and find ways to be sustainable. Yeah.
And it's important for people to recognize that they might look at this and think that like, oh, these people are just trying to make money or trying to do whatever. And it's not like that. I mean, like you have to be economic in order to be feasible in this day and age, right? But that being said, everybody that I know that's in this industry is coming at it from I spend all my time in the bush. I want to be able to continue to spend all my time in the bush and my grandchildren and everything else. So it all comes from a sustainability perspective. It's sustainability first and profit second, right? And that's the key here. And I think with the wood waste recycling industry coming up, I think that's only increasing the amount of, the more we can get out of what little we do take, the better, right? So,
absolutely.
So what do you think, do you see in like, say, like the next 10 or 20 years, how long do you think it'll be till we have a actual, say, like a biofuel ethanol creating plant for wood waste from whatever the wood waste might be? Like how do you see that working? Do you see it being from residuals from harvest, or do you see it coming from landfill wood, or where do you see that biofuel being created from?
Well, the first leaders in that industry sector are forestry. I was talking on the phone with the president of Weyerhaeuser Canada, Fred Disdra, a few weeks ago, and just an amazing, passionate man. And Weyerhaeuser themselves, and like the Canfors and the West Fraser, they're all on board in finding sustainable ways to reuse their wood waste, literally, period.
Yeah.
So they're leading the way in buying and investing in the technologies. So yes, it's just like we just recently had 2 weeks ago, the first conference of its kind in Canada, a lignin conference. And it brought players, stakeholders, investors from around the world. It was here in Edmonton. And West Fraser's leading away on lignin recovery, and they're putting money into it. Now, Alberta government, along with WestJet, have just put out a $20 million grant application. Same thing. If people want to apply, there's monies now available to develop lignin and solid waste and reuse applications. So to try and get a little more to your point of your question is, I would say over the next 2 to 4 years, we're going to have some companies that are corporately have the funds behind them, like the Weyerhaeusers and the West Fraser, that'll step up and announce that, because they already have the technologies where they're heating pulp mills. Same thing. They heat their kilns, and they have their mills and their kilns. They're using their wood waste to heat. Not too many yet are selling the excess and going electrical generation, because, in my opinion, governments aren't in collaboration on that side yet, because my opinion is, again, governments want to talk about waste energy and creating electricity, but if you're off the grid, well, how then the heck does the government get a tax on it?
Yeah, that's the big problem I've seen with that too. We've discussed that quite a bit with people. I don't know much on the podcast or not, but yeah, the problem with the creating your own energy right now, whether it be solar or whatever, is that you're the company, the energy company is buying back at a fraction of the price that you're buying from them. So that needs to be sorted out, because that's a huge missing part of that equation. You know what I mean? If they could just fix that so that people are incentivized to create their own energy, which is the ultimate, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
inevitable, really. Like, it's going to happen.
It will. It's just
eventually. Sooner rather than later, preferably.
Again, and I always got to say it's my own opinion because people start throwing rocks at me, but it's a matter of bringing in the right governmental people that actually are passionate, results-oriented, and aren't all about the coffers and the money in the coffer to do their own thing.
I don't know if you'll ever find a politician that's not about getting reelected.
It's if we look globally, the most sustainable economy in the world is Denmark. Sure, they're paying 38% tax, but there is no unemployment. Medical, health, dental, everything's covered. So why can't we learn from countries like that? So there is sustainability. It is there. It's a mindset. It's getting the politicians to believe and follow through with what they're saying, but easier said than done.
That's a good joke.
It is. Well, it is. But the industry, period. Again, it's our goal is, we're calling this the people's industry. We believe we take provincial government recycling programs now in the big 6 provinces and the smaller as well. We have electronics, we have paint, we have tire recycling. Well, those are government controlled. They're taxed, they're tariffed. It's not a level playing field, in my opinion, for all facilitators that want to be in the recycling sector, and it is what it is. So what we're doing through the business group is we're united through collaboration to address each and every government through policy, rules, and regulations. We advocate. We need them to step up and be accountable, whether it be forestry, whether it be municipal. So our goal is that each province will take the big 6 from British Columbia through to Quebec, that once we're up to, let's say, 80 provincial wood recycling facilitators set up and running, and whether it be a combination of barn wood recycling, or it be portable sawmilling, or it be grinding, screening, shredding, or collaborative of all 3, then we approach each provincial government and ask them to put what's called a prohibition on it, or a ban. We've built the infrastructure. It's now here. It's sustainable. Because if we don't do it as the people, government will come in and it'll be a tax. There'll be carbon taxes and there'll be wood tariffs for wood residual. So literally through our business group, as we build the Canadian Wood Recycling.ca as a national brand name in an industry, it's happening. It's building a legacy for future generations. A lot of it will not be complete, probably in my lifetime. But again, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's perfect. I think we've that's an hour right there. Nailed it. See, told you to go fast.
Yes, you did.
So I always like to ask people if they have any final thoughts they want to end with, anything you want to say, like say to people listening what they can do to try and help. Because there's a lot of forestry professionals listening right now. So.
Well, it's just, if you have a passion, you have questions, and you'd like to contribute to the growth of the Canadian wood recycling as a national industry, region by region, get a hold of us at Canadian Wood Waste Recycling.ca, or look us up on the web, Canadian Wood Recycling Business Group, and we'd be happy to talk to you and see if there's any interest in direct involvement. Just last week, we had a young fella call and ask what it would take to get into portable sawmilling. So we're working and talking, we're connecting him with some of his options and so on and so forth. So we get interest every week, people asking.
Big to small, everything.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for coming in. I appreciate all the good conversation, trying to understand what the picture looks like in Canada regarding wood waste recycling. It looks like we have a long way to go, but we're headed in the direction that we need to be. So
absolutely. Thank you very much, Matthew.
Yeah, no, that was great. So if anyone needs or has any questions for Jim, they can shoot me an email at yourforestpodcast@gmail.com, and I can reach out to him, or you can probably contact him right through the website, I'm sure, too. So, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Enjoy the day.
Oh, yeah. And don't forget to rate and review on iTunes. Leave a comment. That helps me out a lot. Gets it up in the ratings. Thanks a lot, guys.